Tasha opens her Demonomicon before Mordenkainen and Illustrial Silverhand. Her left eye twitches as she speaks in a slight frustration. Many are they who would gladly have prostrated themselves before me, promising their fortunes, their families, their very souls to possess the tome you now see before you. No matter how powerful you believe yourself to be, no matter how great your claim to knowledge, on matters of demon lore, you are a rank novice in my sight. Tasha opens the Demonomicon to page 89. Dagon, Prince of the Depths. Let me tell you of Dagon, as she starts reading aloud. I once met a sailor who claimed to have survived the ruin. He was drunk, of course. Most sailors are, and rightly so. If you had seen what lurks beneath the waves, you'd be drowning yourself in ale too. This man, however, had a tale that intrigued me. Between his bouts of gibbering fear and vacant staring at the floorboards, he sang me a shanty. When I asked him where he learned it, his hands trembled and his voice broke. He died of convulsions shortly thereafter, sprouting gills and choking on air. I warned him not to drink the water. Not out of kindness, mind you, but because it's terribly inconvenient when people expire before they tell me something useful. And he did owe me a drink. There once was an isle dead west of the sunset, a place where the sun's rays danced carefree and bright. Its shores all a-sparkle in white shining beaches, and jungles aplenty with game day and night. They say that the people who dwelt there were happy. They say that they lived their lives simple and fair. Yet one day, a bitter wind rose from the ocean and took the poor folk by surprise, unaware. For ruin had risen in thunderous fury. A ravenous shadow fell over the shore, and when Father Dagon's black gullet gaped open, the waves ran with blood, and the isle was no more. She recounts a section of the Demonomicon, On the Lord of the Deep by Tasha, who knows better and is rarely wrong. The worst kind of demon is the one that does not scream, the one that does not howl, or shriek, or gnash its teeth in fury. No, the worst kind of demon is the one that watches, the one that waits, the one that dreams, and dreams are dreadfully infectious. Dagon was waiting before any of us were paying attention. When the first primordials arrived in the abyss, stamping about like children breaking their toys, Dagon was already there, lurking beneath the blood sea. When Demogorgon, dear, petulant Demogorgon, sought to claim the shard of evil, Dagon rose to challenge him, eldritch and inscrutable. But neither of them won that day, for Obox Ob, that sneaky little insect, scuttled away with the prize. Dagon did not rage. Dagon did not bellow. Dagon sank back beneath the waves. And he waited. That is his nature. His reach is not one of brute force, nor is it of immediate conquest. He does not storm your walls or break your gates. He seeps. He leaks into the cracks of your mind, floods the gaps in your soul, fills the depths of your nightmares. I have walked the shores of the sea of fallen stars. Not because I enjoy sea air, I don't, it frizzes my hair, but because there are secrets to be plucked like pearls from an oyster. And I do love a good prize. I have listened to the babbling of drowned men who should not still breathe, whose lungs should not still rise and fall. I have seen the temples where no god is worshipped, only the whisper of something older, something deeper. He was known there as the sleeper below, the dreamer in the trench, the hunger that waits. Names meant to be frightening, certainly, though honestly, I find the theatrics a bit much. But I'll admit, there's something effective about fear that doesn't announce itself with trumpets and flashing lights. He made his home in the trench of Lopok, where he whispered into the dreams of those foolish enough to swim in his waters. Sailors woke up drowning in their own beds. Children were born with unblinking black eyes. The waves darkened, thick with secrets. Some might call that a tragedy. I call it an opportunity, for study, of course. But of course, an elder demon dreams bigger than that. Dagon had ambition. A pantheon of sea deities stood in his way, lording over their waves and currents, smug in their dominion. Dagon had no such arrogance. He was not satisfied with what he had. He took the depths of the sea of fallen stars and placed them under the thrall of his servants. He wrapped his coils around the deities of the Larian in the Sea of Coronactis, drowning their influence in forgotten magic. It's almost admirable, really. Not the whole drowning the gods bit, but the patience, the cunning. He plays the long game, and as much as I prefer immediate results, I do respect an artful approach. And yet, he is not the screaming kind. He still waits, and he still dreams. And if you are not careful, so will you. But if you do, take notes. I might find them useful. Dagon is immense, its glistening bulk heaving monstrously into the air as a writhing storm of hook-suckered tentacles unfold from its shapeless lower body. Its two longest tentacles terminate in immense five-fingered talons. Its head is that of a deep sea fish, twisted with cruelty and leering with a primordial intelligence, its stiletto-like teeth immense and translucent. Its body is not quite sea serpent, not quite mollusk, and not quite shark, but somehow, horribly, a combination of all three. The ancient Dagon is among the oldest lords of the abyss and patron of those who dwell in the lightless depths of the sea. Dagon survived the rise of the Tanari in large part due to his isolationist nature. When the Queen of Chaos called upon the Obrith lords to aid her in her battle against the Wind Dukes of Ake, Dagon refused her call. Other Obriths did so as well, and the Queen destroyed them for their trouble. Dagon was powerful enough that the Queen dared not raise her tentacles against him. When the Obriths were defeated, Dagon knew his choice had been the right one. Today, Dagon is held as an oracle and seer among the Tanari. They come to Dagon with offerings of weapons and sacrifices in return for ancient knowledge of the abyss and its holdings that predate the rise of the Tanari. This ancient demon has built a mighty empire in his realm of these offerings, and today is one of the mightiest lords in the abyss. Dagon's realm lies directly below Demogorgon's, and the two have entered into a strange sort of alliance. Dagon is served by all manner of aquatic demons and monsters in his realm, which is known as the Shadow Sea, or Layer 89. Despite his Obrith nature, Myrmexicus demons often pay him tribute, if only to keep him appeased. His favoured minions are the Wastroliths, once Obrith themselves. These demons retain loyalty to Dagon, despite the fact that they have evolved beyond their ancient roots into their own beings. Dagon's presence is felt on the material plane as well. He is sought by powerful and insane spellcasters for the ancient secrets he guards, and has been known to grant these secrets through spells. Dagon is also venerated as a god by certain aquatic races. Kraken are known to worship him, as do some chouls and sea hags. The most fanatic of his worshippers are certain ancient tribes of Quotoa that dwell in the depths of the open sea and have never heard of Blibdoolpoop. These Quotoa hold that their race has existed for eons before the advent of the gods, and that in these ancient times, they were the chosen minions of Dagon. Tasha stares at Mordenkainen. She grins at him ever so slightly. You describe the balance, Mordenkainen, how the worlds of the abyss and the 9 hells maintain an endless cycle of torment, but for the betterment of the natural order of the multiverse. I concur, but perhaps not if I had not seen the layers of the abyss for myself. Let me tell you of my humble, if not brilliant adventure to the 89th. Dagon's Shadow Sea, an inky abyss beneath an abyss, tucked away in the foul and fathomless depths of Demogorgon's gaping maw. A place so vile and miserable that even the wretched demons fear to tread its dark waters without trembling. Naturally, I simply had to visit. After all, Where else would one go for a bit of peace and quiet, away from the endless drivel of lesser minds? Surely no one would be so rude as to interrupt my studies in the domain of an Obrith as ancient and bloated as Dagon. The journey itself was, how shall I put this, unpleasant. I am not fond of being wet unless it involves a lavish bath with imported soaps. The Shadow Sea, sadly, does not provide such luxuries. It is a realm of silence and suffocation, where the very water seems to hunger for warmth and life. The pressure here does not simply crush, it oppresses, a cold hand squeezing the will from lesser creatures. Even the demons that call this wretched place home seem weary, their forms dull, their minds sluggish under the weight of an existence spent in darkness. Fortunately, I am not lesser. Dagon's palace was precisely as grotesque as I expected. A cancerous heap of sludge and writhing filth, cut through with tunnels large enough for the sea worms that infest it like parasites. The place stank of brine, rot, and something older than time itself. Skittering things, phosphorescent and blind, scurried between the crevices of the palace, while clouds of pollution drifted in the dark, swirling masses neither wholly alive nor dead, hungering for flesh to strip away. It was, of course, delightful, but then, wouldn't you know it, a kraken noticed me. Not just any kraken, an abyssal kraken, a horror vast enough to smother cities, its flesh seething with the filth of the deep, eyes like molten pits, tendrils covered in barbed suckers large enough to peel a bailer like an overripe fruit. It emerged from the blackness like a nightmare made real, and I sighed. Not because I was afraid, perish the thought, but because I had already spent quite enough time being inconvenienced by the local wildlife. It lunged, of course, because stupidity is universal in the abyss, and I answered as I always do, with sorcery and style. A displacement spell, and its first strike went wide. A chain of lightning bolts crackled through the water, illuminating the vast trench in flickering blue light. The beast shrieked, but pain alone would not stop a creature of such monstrous proportions. So, I was forced to get clever. Summoning illusions of prey, I turned its own gluttony against it, weaving false shapes of great, abyssal whales, fat and helpless. The kraken surged forward, and in its blind hunger, it entangled itself in my waiting snares of force and shadow. It thrashed, howled, and coiled its terrible limbs, but I had already laid my final trick, calling forth a tide of entropy, a swirling current of dissolution that stripped flesh to bone and eroded reality itself. It howled once more, and I relished the sound. When it was over, I stood upon its slowly dissolving corpse, the black blood of the deep washing away into nothingness. The water around me churned with the remnants of my latest conquest. But even then, I was not alone. Wastreliths lingered on the edge of my vision, their foul, eel-like forms lurking just beyond reach, eyes filled with the sort of malice that only those truly at home in this place could possess. Even the Sculvin and Mimixicus, demons that would normally feast upon a carcass such as this, hesitated, no doubt weighing their hunger against the wrath of Dagon's chosen. And there, in that moment of triumph, I did what any self-respecting archmage would do. I recorded it. Abyssal Kraken now entered into my Demonomicon, a prize not of vanity, though let's be honest, I do look good with my quill in hand, but of knowledge, power, perhaps even one day, amusement. Several days pass, and within the same decorated hall the three always met, they again sat. Tasha, lounging comfortably in her chair, eyes flickering with mischief, began her recounting. Mordenkainen and Illustrial sat opposite her, ever vigilant in their knowledge and power, though they had come to understand that listening to Tasha's retellings often required more than just a passing interest. It was an exercise in patience, and for Tasha, a thrilling game. Oh, Dagon, what a character! she started, her voice dripping with sarcastic amusement. Not quite the picture of a dignified demon lord, but you know, the abyss is nothing if not full of charmers. Mordenkainen raised an eyebrow, his usual composed demeanor slightly cracked. You're not going to tell it like it's another one of your jest-filled tales, are you, Tasha? Oh, come now, she teased, waving her hand in mock offense. Do you really think I'd leave out the juicy bits? Now, listen closely. She cleared her throat dramatically and leaned forward. So, the tale of Dagon, our dear sea-bound fiend. After the wild tide portals were opened, what a glorious spectacle it was. Swamping the Larian, crushing them beneath the waves with his minions. And for a moment, just a moment, it seemed like the sea of fallen stars was his. Tasha sighed exaggeratedly, as if she were recounting a particularly tragic opera. But what's this? Those clever Larian did what? Resisted? Survived? She paused, raising a finger in mock disbelief. Intervention, you see. They had their protectors, those pesky merfolk who did manage to rescue some of them. Always an unfortunate twist in a well-laid plan, wouldn't you say? Illustrial Silverhand's eyes narrowed with curiosity, her regal composure hiding a deep sense of concern. What happened to the Larian afterward? Their gods, were they truly silent? Tasha's expression turned more thoughtful, but there was an edge of lingering mockery. Indeed, the gods were silent. Or perhaps they ignored them. The Larian had to find something to cling to, didn't they? And so, as the wild tides came again and again, every 720 years, mind you, they began to venerate Dagon. He wasn't just a demon, he was a god to them. One who had no need for divine rules, no need for silence. No, Dagon's cult became their beacon, and it flourished in the sea of Coronactus. Mordenkainen leaned back, his eyes thoughtful. A disturbing thing to see a culture replace its gods with a demon. Oh yes, very disturbing, Tasha replied with a smirk. But let's not ignore the true horror of the situation. Between the fourth and fifth tide, the cult had already infiltrated the deepest corners of their society. Even after the fifth and final tide, well, the portal stayed, didn't it? It became permanent, and their secrets festered like a wound that refuses to heal. Tasha gave a little shrug. Oh, they tried to hide it. The Larian of the Sea of Fallen Stars cut off all travel between their homelands, thinking they could bury the truth. But Dagon's influence was too far-reaching, too deep. His presence lingered like the water's grasp on a drowning man. But it's not just that, she continued, a glint of mischief returning to her eyes. There's a legend, one, not many, care to mention. Some whisper that Demonomicon, the great Chaos Lord, was the first of his kind to set foot in the abyss, right after its creation, mind you. And shortly after, along came Dagon, the arrogant demon, thinking he could challenge the primordials themselves for control. Her voice grew lower, more conspiratorial. A challenge for the throne of the abyss. Can you imagine? Demogorgon, the primal force of madness, and Dagon, the cunning creature of the deep, locked in some horrible, endless struggle for supremacy. Tasha paused dramatically, her eyes twinkling with wicked delight. But neither truly won, you see. Demogorgon and Dagon, two sides of the same coin, two demons destined to wage their war for eternity, unable to claim dominion. All the while, the abyssal depths roil beneath their feet, where they're far too busy with their petty squabbles to notice the tides of fate rising around them. She sat back with a satisfied sigh. And so, that's the final act for Dagon, a demon bound by his own desires, who failed even in his pursuit of control over the abyss. And still, he's out there, lurking beneath the waves, his cult growing quietly, feeding off the remnants of those who once defied him. Her tone softened, though there was no lessening of the amusement in her voice. Isn't it always the way? The loudest of the villains, the ones who would tear the world asunder, are often the ones who can never truly rule it. Always fighting, never finished. Mordenkainen exchanged a glance with Illustrial. "You're saying this isn't over?" Tasha chuckled, her eyes gleaming. "Oh, it's never over. It's the abyss. There's always a new twist, a new tide. I just hope the next one will be a little more entertaining, don't you?" Illustrial crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "We'll see, Tasha. We'll see."